Welcome back to the Baseball Hut 2. We talk about Major League Baseball and things that are happening in the news in Major League Baseball. But here we talk about the White Sox, who are kind of sort of ended in a bad division there in the American League Central. This is from MLB Trade Rumors of all places. White Sox reportedly only willing to trade rental players. The White Sox are potentially lined up to be sellers at the deadline, though exactly how much they commit to that task remains to be seen. Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic reports that as of now, they might only be willing to move in pending free agents. Those plans could always change as discussions take place, but as a noteworthy stance at the moment, the trade deadline is August 1st at 6 p.m. At this point, it's not even necessarily locked that the White Sox will be sellers at all. Despite their poor 30-40 record, they are only 5.5 games back of the Twins in the weak American League Central Division. But the wildcard race is much stronger, putting them 9.5 games out of a spot there. A hot streak could get them right back in the division race, but those have been hard to come by this season. I would point out that if they had Tony La Russa there, they would be in great shape. Even though you got to roll him out in a walker and in a wheelchair. And they need that lift, to get up from the clubhouse into the dugout for him. And the front office needs to at least. I'm not saying that Tony is old, but when he was born, there was a war going on, the Civil War, and the front office, the American Civil War. What am I talking about? And the front office needs to at least consider the possibility that they stay on the outside looking in. Like all clubs, the players on the roster have varied contractual situations that affect the trade calculus. It seems the club is currently leaning towards trading players on expiring contracts, but keeping players with more control in order to take another shot at contending next year. Even by limiting themselves to a softer sell, they would still have plenty of players to discuss in trade talks. Lucas Giolito, Mike Clevinger, Yasmani Grandal, Ellis Andrus, Ronaldo Lopez, and Kenyon Middleton are all set to reach free agency this winter and would be the club's best trade chips. Clevinger's deal has a mutual option for 24, but those are rarely picked up by both parties. Giolito will be one of the top names on the market this summer if he were available. Keep an eye on him. Also, they didn't mention this as Lance Lynn. I keep mentioning him. Keep an eye on him. Now 28 years old, Giolito has gone year to year in arbitration. He's now in his third and final arbitration year, making $10.4 million. Just about every contender will be looking to bolster their rotation for the final months of the season and the playoffs, which should give Giolito widespread interest. Even teams on the lower end of the spending spectrum could fit that salary figure onto their books. Meaning few clubs will be eliminated from the list of logical suitors. Now, he's not making a lot of money. For a guy that's had some success in the majors, he's got a no-hitter. It's very surprising that I don't think that he would be a very difficult player to move. There are also a couple of borderline cases who could be considered rentals. The Sox have an $18 million option on Lance Lynn for next year with a $1 million buyout. His 6.75 ERA this year makes it less likely that gets picked up, but it also diminishes trade appeal. Joe Kelly's in somewhat similar situation, as he can be kept around for 24 via a $9.5 million club option for a $1 million buyout. He has a 4.57 ERA, but strong peripherals and blah, blah, blah. Okay, they say he's going to get better. The club also has a $15 million option on Liam Hendricks. I want to point this out. I don't think he's going to get moved. I think sentimentally you can't move him, and I don't think it would be right considering the fact that the man has cancer. Even though it's in remission, he's not out of the. In my view, I would not even entertain any kind of trade for him. They mentioned a couple other names here. Tim Anderson, I don't think he's going to get moved, and I don't think Dylan Cease is going to get moved either. They'd be asking a lot to ask for him in a trade. But that's how I look at it. I don't see Liam Hendricks getting moved. I don't see Tim Anderson being moved, and I don't see Dylan Cease getting moved because I still think that they probably look at themselves as kind of a contender next year. Now, the Los Angeles Angels are 7 games over 500. They're only 1 game behind the wild card, the last wild card in the American League. Now, the big issues they have in Anaheim is the fact that that team does not have much infield production. So they could be in line to get an infielder. I'm going to read you from MLB trade rumors. Angels infield woes. After putting Zach Neto on the injured list earlier in the day with an oblique issue, the Angels saw their infield depth taken apart in last night's game against the Rangers, as discussed by Sam Bloom of The Athletic. Gio Urshela exited the game with a hip injury and spoke to reporters on crutches after the game, indicating he expected to miss time. Meanwhile, third baseman Anthony Rendon was struck in the wrist by a pitch and left him unable to swing the bat for the rest of the game, though he did stay in the game on defense due to the lack of options on the bench. Rendon is set to undergo testing today to determine the severity of his injury. Now, he has done nothing, absolutely nothing this year. He's got 1 home run. This is a guy, I'm a New York Mets fan. This is a guy who absolutely wrecked the New York Mets. Every time the Mets faced him, he would get big hit after big hit after big hit. And you know what? Serves him right. Serves him right that he can't get big hits. And he's also a guy who's thin skin. We know early in the season he got into a confrontation with an A's fan. Of all teams, an A's fan. The injuries come at a brutal time for the Angels, who have surged in recent weeks to a 39-32 record. Just 1 game back for a wild card spot in the AL, in the American League. If Urshela and Rendon both join Neto on the shelf, however, the club's infield will be in dire straits. Jarrett Walsh can take over for Urshela at first base, while Luis Rengifo and Brandon Drury combine to cover second and third. Now, Drury's on the IL as well. Leaving shortstop Andrew Velasquez, Michael Stefanik, and Livan Soto are both infield options on the 40-man roster who could provide depth behind that group. And finally in this video, we're going to talk about this Mets-Reds trade talk that will not go away. Now, as you know, the Mets have been struggling since the beginning of the season. They're a little over 4 games off 500. They have many, many games behind in the wild card. And the Mets don't have a closer, although at Citi Field today on Friday, Edwin Diaz was seen thrown in the outfield. Now, I don't know how close he is. It would be quite the miracle if he were to make it back before the end of the season. But this is a rumor that really started last year. Prior to the trade deadline, the Mets were trying to get his brother, Alexis Diaz, who's the closer for the Cincinnati Reds. Now, the Reds have sort of taken a bit of a turn for the better over the last few weeks. They've played much, much better. You know, some of their younger players are starting to come through. We've been introduced to Ellie De La Cruz, the new shortstop there in Cincinnati. But there has been talk that the Mets have been very interested and been trying to get Alexis Diaz from the Reds. Let me read you from Fansided, finish this video out. And then before we get into it, please, of course, subscribe to Baseball Hut 2 and let me know what you think. Could the Mets actually keep it in the family and go after Cincinnati Reds closer Alexis Diaz? New York Post John Heyman believes Alexis Diaz remains firmly on New York's radar. Other MLB pundits are a little more skeptical since no one knows for sure whether the Reds will sell or not in 23. The Mets have been in dire need of bullpen help since Edwin Diaz's injury, and adding his brother Alexis makes a lot of sense. Alexis Diaz has flourished in his first year as the club's full-time closer with a 1.65 ERA, and over in New York, Mets bullpen stands out as one of their most pressing issues this season. Part of the reason that is the case, folks, is because the Mets starting pitching has been so bad that a lot of these guys have been out by the 4th and 5th inning, and they've had to stretch out this bullpen, and they've had to ask guys like Adam Ottavino and David Robertson, who are older, to go more than 1 inning and keep going back to back. It's very difficult for them. From a pragmatic standpoint, the Mets may not be willing to give up that much, though. Cincinnati's reportedly looking for young pitching, and will most likely want to price some of New York's top prospects away. We'll see whether this rumor continues to persist close to the trade deadline. Now, about that Met pitching prospects, New York Mets have very little. They have a guy named Mike Vassell, who's been going through the system for the last few years. And also a pitcher named Christian Scott, who made his Double-A debut yesterday. They are not even close to being ready, and they are not top of the rotation guys. They're more the 3, the 4, to 5 type starters, from what I've read, from what I've seen here. So that's not going to get it done for a guy of that quality. I mean, you have to give up a big prospect. Last year, the rumor was they were dangling Mauricio. The teams wanted Mauricio. They wanted Vientos. They wanted Alvarez. Obviously, they wanted Alvarez and Beatty. The Mets are going to have a very difficult time trying to make a major trade before the trade deadline. That's just my own prediction. That Billy Apple, who did not do a good job in the last trade deadline, will have a very difficult time this time around because he cannot move certain players from the farm system. He'd be having to move major league pieces that don't have a lot of value. But you let me know what you think about this video overall. And of course, please subscribe to Baseball Head 2. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.